Imagine a queen, not of fairy tales, but of stardust and ancient sands, a woman who held the gaze of empires. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, wasn't just a ruler. She was a whisper of legend, a name that still echoes through time. Tonight, let her story unfold, not with booming declarations, but with the gentle cadence of a lullaby, a soft journey into a life of passion, power, and the quiet moments that shaped a world. Drift away as we explore the woman behind the myth, a queen who charmed the most powerful men, not just with beauty, but with a mind as sharp as the desert sun. The Nile's Whisper. The Nile's Whisper is the gentle murmur of the great river, a sound that has lulled generations to sleep. It's the sound of water flowing, a constant, soothing rhythm, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. Imagine standing on the banks, the air thick with the scent of lotus blossoms and damp earth, and hearing that soft, insistent flow. It's a sound that speaks of timelessness, of cycles of flood and harvest, of life unfolding in a steady, unhurried way. This is the sound that Cleopatra would have known intimately, a constant companion to her royal life. Think of it like the hum of a refrigerator, but infinitely more natural and profound. That steady, low drone is comforting because it signals that everything is working as it should. The Nile's Whisper is like that, but on a grand, ancient scale. It's the sound of a vital artery, bringing life to a desert land, ensuring that the crops grow and the people thrive. It's a sound that whispers secrets of the past, of pharaohs and queens, of gods and goddesses, all carried on the water's gentle current. The whisper isn't just a single note, it's a symphony of subtle sounds. There's the soft lapping against the shore, the gentle sigh as it winds through reeds, the distant murmur of boats gliding by. It's a soundscape that changes with the light, from the golden hues of dawn to the deep indigo of night. For Cleopatra, this was the soundtrack to her palace, the constant reassurance of Egypt's enduring power and beauty. It's a sound that invites you to relax, to let go of your worries, and to drift into a peaceful slumber, just as it would have invited her. A dynasty's dawn. The Ptolemaic dynasty, a lineage of Greek rulers, first took hold of Egypt when Alexander the Great's general, Ptolemy I Soter, declared himself king. This marked a significant shift, ushering in an era where Hellenistic culture intertwined with ancient Egyptian traditions. Think of it like bringing your favorite music playlist to a new city. It influences the local vibe, but the city's own rhythm remains. These rulers, with their Macedonian Greek roots, adopted many Egyptian customs, including religious practices and even the pharaonic titles, though they often retained their Greek language and administration. It was a clever balancing act, a way to legitimize their rule in the eyes of the native population while maintaining their distinct heritage. Cleopatra VII, the most famous of the Ptolemies, was born into this complex world. Her family tree was a tangled vine of Greek kings and queens, ruling Egypt for nearly 3 centuries. She wasn't just a queen, she was a product of this unique blend of cultures. Imagine growing up in a household where you're taught ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs alongside Greek philosophy. That was the reality for these rulers. They were the bridge between 2 mighty civilizations, and Cleopatra, with her sharp intellect and ambition, was poised to be the most prominent figure on that bridge. The early days of the Ptolemaic reign were characterized by a strong, centralized monarchy. These kings were patrons of the arts and sciences, founding magnificent libraries and temples. Alexandria, their capital city, became a beacon of learning and commerce, attracting scholars and merchants from across the known world. It was a time of great prosperity and cultural exchange, a period where new ideas flourished, much like how a bustling marketplace can spark innovation. The dynasty's foundation was built on a powerful military and a shrewd understanding of economics, ensuring their grip on the fertile lands of Egypt. This dynasty's dawn wasn't a sudden sunrise, but a gradual, deliberate ascent. Ptolemy I, a seasoned general, understood the importance of stability and consolidation. He established a robust administrative system, drawing on both Greek and Egyptian expertise. His successors continued this work, solidifying their power through strategic alliances, careful management of Egypt's vast resources, especially its grain, and a willingness to adapt. It was a dynasty forged in the crucible of conquest, but sustained by a keen political mind and a deep respect for the land they governed. The young princess, Cleopatra, even as a young girl, possessed a remarkable spirit. She wasn't just another royal child. She was born into a world of immense power and ancient traditions. Her early life unfolded within the gilded walls of the Ptolemaic Palace in Alexandria, a city buzzing with scholars, merchants, and people from all corners of the known world. Imagine a sprawling palace, not unlike a grand hotel today, but filled with hieroglyphs on the walls and papyrus scrolls instead of brochures. She would have seen vibrant processions, heard the murmur of different languages, and perhaps even caught glimpses of formidable Roman envoys passing through. Her education was far from ordinary. While other girls might have learned needlepoint, Cleopatra was tutored in languages, philosophy, and statecraft. Think of it like attending the most exclusive boarding school, but instead of learning calculus, she was mastering diplomacy and understanding the intricate dance of political alliances. She learned to speak several languages fluently, a skill that would later prove invaluable. This wasn't just for show. It meant she could converse directly with ambassadors from Greece, Rome, and beyond, understanding their nuances without relying on translators. Much like a modern CEO who speaks multiple languages to close international deals. Even as a child, there were whispers about her intelligence and her ambition. She observed her father, Ptolemy XII, navigating the treacherous waters of Egyptian politics. She saw how alliances were forged and broken, how wealth and influence were wielded. This early exposure to the realities of power shaped her understanding of the world. Picture a young girl watching a complex chess game, not just moving the pieces, but truly grasping the strategy behind each move, anticipating future plays. Her childhood was a constant lesson in observation and deduction, preparing her for the immense responsibilities she would eventually inherit. Alexandria's Labyrinth. The Great Library of Alexandria, a beacon of ancient knowledge, was more than just shelves of scrolls. It was a sprawling complex, a city within a city, where scholars from across the known world gathered. Think of it like a massive university campus today, but instead of lecture halls and dormitories, you had vast halls filled with papyrus and quiet courtyards for contemplation. This was the intellectual heart of Cleopatra's realm, a place where ideas were born and debated, where the universe was mapped and mysteries were unraveled. It was a place of intense study, but also a place of quiet contemplation, where the rustle of papyrus was the loudest sound. Within this magnificent library lay its most intriguing and perhaps most legendary section, the Mouseion. This wasn't just a reading room. It was a research institute, a place where brilliant minds were supported and encouraged to pursue their passions. Imagine a modern-day think tank, but with the added prestige of royal patronage and access to an unparalleled collection of texts. Here, mathematicians like Euclid might have worked, their theorems taking shape on wax tablets, or astronomers charting the stars with rudimentary but ingenious instruments. It was a hub of innovation, a place where the foundations of science and philosophy were being laid, brick by intellectual brick. Cleopatra herself, known for her sharp intellect and linguistic skills, would have undoubtedly spent time here, engaging with the scholars, perhaps even contributing her own insights. She understood the power of knowledge, not just for its own sake, but as a tool for governance and influence. The library and its Mouseion were not just repositories of the past. They were engines for the future, shaping the understanding of the world for generations to come. It was a place of profound quietude, punctuated by the murmur of scholarly discourse, a gentle hum of intellectual activity that filled the air. Roman shadows gather. The air in Alexandria grew heavy, not with the usual scent of spices and the sea, but with a chill that had nothing to do with the Mediterranean breeze. Whispers, like dry leaves skittering across marble floors, began to circulate. These were not the idle gossip of the marketplace. These were pronouncements, heavy with the weight of distant legions and the pronouncements of men who saw Egypt as little more than a ripe fig, ready to be plucked. Roman influence, once a distant hum, was now a palpable presence, its shadow stretching long and dark across the sun-drenched city. It was as if the very stones of the palaces, accustomed to the vibrant life of the Ptolemies, were beginning to absorb the stern, unyielding granite of Roman ambition. The grand halls, once echoing with the laughter of courtiers and the melodies of Egyptian harps, now seemed to hold their breath. Foreign voices, speaking in clipped, authoritative tones, started to be heard more frequently, their Latin phrases a stark contrast to the lyrical Greek and ancient Egyptian spoken by the populace. These were the emissaries, the advisors, the men sent to ensure that Cleopatra's reign, and by extension Egypt's wealth, remained firmly aligned with the interests of Rome. One could almost picture them, their togas crisp, their faces impassive, like statues carved from marble, observing everything with an unnerving stillness, their eyes missing nothing. It was a subtle occupation, this Roman shadow play, a slow tightening of an invisible noose. Even the bustling port, usually a symphony of shouted orders and creaking ropes, felt the shift. More Roman galleys docked, their formidable beaks pointed towards the harbor entrance, a silent, potent reminder of who held the true power in the Mediterranean. The grain ships, Egypt's lifeblood, were now scrutinized with a new intensity. It wasn't just about trade anymore. It was about tribute, about ensuring Rome's vast appetite was satisfied. The merchants, who had always navigated the currents of diplomacy with a keen eye, found themselves dealing with a new, less flexible set of rules. The golden age of Egyptian independence, it seemed, was being slowly dimmed, like a lamp flickering in an encroaching twilight. Caesar's arrival. The air in Alexandria hummed with a strange mix of anticipation and unease. For weeks, whispers had circulated like desert winds about the Roman general, Julius Caesar, a man whose name was already legend. He wasn't just any visitor. He was a force of nature, a conqueror who had reshaped the known world with his legions. His arrival was not a casual one, but a calculated move in the intricate dance of power that defined the Ptolemaic kingdom. Imagine a particularly important guest arriving at your home, not just for tea, but because they hold the keys to your family's future. That was the gravity of Caesar's presence. When his fleet finally appeared on the horizon, a collection of imposing warships against the azure Mediterranean sky, a hush fell over the bustling port. Soldiers lined the docks, their polished armor glinting, a stark reminder of Rome's formidable military might. Cleopatra, still a young woman but already possessing a keen political mind, understood the implications. This wasn't just about a foreign dignitary. It was about securing her own position, her very survival, in a court rife with intrigue and sibling rivalry. She needed a powerful ally, and Caesar, with his vast influence and decisive nature, was precisely that. The initial encounter was likely a study in controlled diplomacy. Caesar, accustomed to deference, would have been met with the full ceremonial grandeur Alexandria could muster. Yet, beneath the veneer of pomp, there was a strategic assessment. He would have been observing Cleopatra, her demeanor, her intelligence, her potential. Was she a pawn or a player? Cleopatra, in turn, would have been studying him, the renowned general, the man who had charmed and conquered so many. It was a moment where empires could shift, not with the clash of swords, but with the subtle exchange of words and glances. It was like two chess grandmasters sizing each other up before making their opening moves on a very, very important board. A queen's bold gambit. Cleopatra, a queen known for her sharp intellect and captivating presence, faced a precarious situation. Egypt, her kingdom, was caught in the vast power struggles of Rome. She needed an ally, a powerful one, and she knew exactly who to turn to: Julius Caesar. He was the most influential man in the Roman world, a general and statesman of immense renown. To reach him, however, was no simple feat. Roman factions were wary of her, and direct access was a challenge. Her solution was audacious. Rather than send emissaries or wait for an audience, Cleopatra decided to take matters into her own hands. She arranged to be smuggled into the royal palace in Alexandria, where Caesar was staying. This wasn't a grand procession, it was a clandestine operation. She was reportedly rolled up inside a carpet or a linen sack, carried by a trusted servant. Imagine being bundled up like laundry, hoping for the best. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a physical manifestation of her daring spirit. When the sack was unrolled, revealing the Queen of Egypt herself, Caesar was reportedly astonished and undeniably impressed. This bold move bypassed all the usual diplomatic protocols, and presented her directly to him. It was a masterstroke, demonstrating not only her courage but also her resourcefulness. She wasn't just a queen. She was a strategist, willing to take extraordinary risks to secure her position and her kingdom. This personal encounter, born from such a dramatic entrance, would forge a powerful alliance. The Egyptian embrace. The Egyptian embrace, a concept often whispered in tales of ancient allure, speaks to a profound connection with the land and its lifeblood. It wasn't merely about the Nile River, though its presence was undeniably central. Think of it as a deep, almost spiritual hug from Egypt itself, a feeling of belonging that permeated everything. Imagine the fertile black soil, the Kemet, that the Egyptians revered. It was the source of their sustenance, a gift from the gods, and embracing it meant embracing life itself. This wasn't a casual handshake. It was a full-bodied immersion, a recognition of how utterly dependent they were on the river's bounty and the sun's warmth. This embrace extended to the very rhythm of their existence. Life in ancient Egypt was dictated by the inundation of the Nile, a predictable cycle that brought renewal. Farmers would watch the waters rise, knowing that soon their fields would be replenished, ready for planting. This waiting, this anticipation, was part of the embrace. It taught patience and trust. Even the architecture, with its massive stone structures reaching for the heavens, seemed to echo this deep connection, anchoring them to the earth while simultaneously aspiring to something greater. It was a constant dialogue between the terrestrial and the divine. Consider the perfumes and oils they used, often derived from local flora like lotus and jasmine. These weren't just for smelling nice. They were an integral part of rituals, a way to connect with the natural world and its fragrant essence. When Cleopatra and her court adorned themselves, they were drawing upon the very soul of Egypt. It was like wearing the scent of a cherished garden, a constant reminder of home and heritage. This sensory connection was a powerful form of embrace, weaving the personal into the fabric of the land. It was a quiet acknowledgement that they were not separate from nature, but an intrinsic part of its grand design, much like a single reed swaying in the Nile breeze. A son is born. The air in the palace was thick with anticipation, a hush falling over the usually bustling chambers. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, lay in a state of serene exhaustion, the ordeal of childbirth finally behind her. Her body, once a symbol of power and allure, now bore the beautiful, tender marks of creation. A tiny, squalling miracle had entered the world, a son, a true heir to her magnificent kingdom. His cries, though sharp, were the sweetest music Cleopatra had ever heard, a symphony of new life echoing through the royal suite. She felt a profound, primal connection to this small being, a love so fierce it took her breath away. It was a love unlike any she had known before, a love that transcended politics, ambition, and even the weight of her crown. This was the purest form of power, the power of a mother. His skin was soft, impossibly so, and his tiny hands, curled into miniature fists, seemed to hold the secrets of the universe. When he finally quieted, nestled against her warmth, his breaths were shallow, rhythmic sighs against her chest. Each inhale and exhale was a precious gift, a testament to the miracle that had just unfolded. Cleopatra traced the delicate curve of his ear with a trembling finger, marveling at the perfection of his form. She whispered his name, a name that would soon be known across the land, a name that carried the hopes and dreams of a dynasty. It was a moment of quiet intimacy, a world away from the grand pronouncements and political maneuverings that defined her public life. Here, in the soft lamplight, surrounded by her trusted attendants, she was simply a mother, lost in the wonder of her newborn son. This child represented more than just a continuation of her lineage. He was a symbol of hope, a tangible promise of the future. In a world often fraught with uncertainty and shifting alliances, his birth was a beacon, a grounding force. He was a living embodiment of her love, a testament to her strength and her capacity for deep, unwavering affection. The weight of her responsibilities as queen would return, of course, but for this precious moment, it felt lighter, softened by the tender miracle cradled in her arms. The world outside could wait. For now, there was only the gentle rhythm of her son's breathing, the warmth of his body against hers, and the overwhelming, all-encompassing love of a mother. The serpent's charm. The asp, that sleek, dark creature of the Nile, was more than just a symbol of power for Cleopatra. It was a whisper of ancient magic, a silent promise of a swift and dignified end when all other paths closed. Imagine, if you will, a queen accustomed to the finest silks and the most potent perfumes, choosing the cool, dry scales of a serpent for her final embrace. It wasn't a desperate act, but a calculated one, a final, theatrical flourish in a life lived on the grandest stage. The Romans, her conquerors, would tell tales of her legendary beauty and her cunning intellect, but they would also speak of this peculiar choice, this embrace of the venomous. It spoke of a queen who understood the symbolism, who knew that a death by asp was a death with a certain, undeniable mystique, far removed from the messy finality of a Roman blade or poison. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision, fueled by panic. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, would have considered her options. She was a woman who commanded armies, who charmed emperors, and who navigated the treacherous currents of Roman politics. To believe she would simply surrender to her fate without a final, carefully orchestrated act would be to misunderstand her entirely. The asp, with its silent strike and its potent venom, offered a way out that preserved her dignity, her legend. It was a final act of defiance, a refusal to be paraded through Rome in chains. Think of it like a skilled performer choosing their final bow, ensuring the audience remembers them in their most dramatic and powerful light. The venom of the asp, while deadly, was known for its relatively quick action, inducing a deep sleep before the final cessation of breath. This wasn't a drawn-out agony, but a descent into unconsciousness. It's a stark contrast to the often violent and public executions of the era. For Cleopatra, who had wielded so much influence, who had been the center of so much attention, a quiet, almost imperceptible fading away would have been a powerful statement. It was the ultimate control, even in defeat. She chose her exit, just as she had chosen her alliances and her lovers. The serpent, in its silent, deadly elegance, became her final confidant, her willing accomplice in a drama that would echo through the ages. Rome's unrest. The very foundations of Rome were beginning to creak and groan. It wasn't a sudden earthquake, but more like a persistent tremor, a feeling that something was shifting beneath the polished marble of their great city. Think of it like a favorite old armchair that suddenly developed a wobble. You can still sit in it, but you're not quite as relaxed as you used to be. This unease stemmed from a whole jumble of things, a bit like a poorly organized pantry where everything is just a mess. There were whispers in the Senate, arguments that seemed to go on forever, and power struggles that were as dramatic as any play. Imagine two children squabbling over a toy, but instead of a toy, it was control over legions and provinces. This wasn't just about personal ambition, though that was certainly a part of it. It was about different ideas on how Rome should be run, who should have the most say, and what Rome's place in the world should be. Some wanted to expand, to conquer more lands, while others worried about the cost, both in money and in Roman lives. And then there were the people. The streets of Rome weren't always filled with the cheers of victorious parades. There was poverty, discontent, and a growing sense that the vast wealth Rome was accumulating wasn't reaching everyone. It's like a baker making a magnificent cake, but only sharing tiny crumbs with most of his customers. Eventually, those customers get hungry and a bit grumpy. This simmering resentment could be easily stirred, and ambitious individuals knew just how to do it, often by promising solutions that were easier said than done. This internal friction made Rome a complex and sometimes volatile place, a far cry from the image of unshakable power it projected to the outside world. Caesar's end. The whispers began subtly, like the rustling of papyrus in a forgotten tomb. Caesar, the man who had bent empires to his will, found himself surrounded by shadows, even in the bright Roman sun. His trust, once a mighty shield, had begun to fray. He'd grown accustomed to adoration, to the cheers of the legions, but the Senate, that ancient heart of Rome, harbored a different kind of pulse, one of ambition and fear. Imagine a grand feast, where the wine flows freely, but the knives are hidden beneath the silken robes. That's how it felt, the air thick with unspoken threats. His relationships, once sources of strength, now carried a peculiar weight. The senators, his peers and rivals, watched his every move. They saw his power, his undeniable influence, and a chilling thought took root. What if he became too much? What if his ambition eclipsed theirs, leaving them mere footnotes in his grand narrative? It wasn't just about power, it was about legacy, about the very soul of Rome. They worried he might crown himself king, a title Rome had long sworn to abolish. It was a fear so potent it could drive men to desperate acts, much like a farmer might protect his harvest from a ravenous flock. Then came that fateful day, the Ides of March. The Senate convened, a familiar ritual, but the atmosphere was charged, electric. Caesar entered, perhaps oblivious, perhaps with a grim foreboding he couldn't quite shake. He walked amongst them, men he knew, men he had pardoned, men he had elevated. The daggers, concealed with chilling precision, emerged from the folds of their togas. It was a betrayal so profound, so immediate, it must have stolen his breath. He saw faces he recognized, friends turned assassins, and in that final, agonizing moment, the world he had so painstakingly built crumbled around him. It was a stark reminder that even the mightiest can fall, not just to armies, but to the quiet machinations of those closest. Antony's ascent. The Roman Republic, a sprawling entity of ambition and power, was a stage where great men vied for influence. Among them, Marcus Antonius, or Antony as history remembers him, began his climb. He wasn't born into the highest echelons of Roman society, but his lineage was respectable, and he possessed a natural charisma that drew people to him. Think of it like a popular kid in school, not necessarily the richest, but the one everyone wants to hang out with, the one with the easy smile and the confident stride. Antony had that swagger, that undeniable presence. His early military career provided the stepping stones. He served with distinction, showing bravery on the battlefield, which is a bit like earning your stripes through sheer hard work and a bit of daring. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, and the soldiers respected that. This earned him opportunities, chances to prove himself further. He learned the art of command, of inspiring loyalty, much like a coach who understands how to motivate a team to win, not just through strategy, but through a shared sense of purpose. A pivotal moment came with his association with Julius Caesar. Caesar, a man of immense power and foresight, recognized Antony's potential. He brought Antony into his inner circle, a bit like a mentor taking a promising protege under their wing. This wasn't just about friendship, it was about political alliance. Caesar needed loyal, capable men, and Antony fit the bill perfectly. He became Caesar's trusted lieutenant, a vital cog in Caesar's rise to dominance. This partnership allowed Antony to gain experience in governance and diplomacy, broadening his horizons beyond the battlefield. As Caesar's power grew, so did Antony's. He held important political offices, experiencing the rough and tumble of Roman politics firsthand. It was a complex game of alliances, rivalries, and shifting loyalties, where one wrong move could send you tumbling down. Antony, however, navigated these treacherous waters with a certain flair, sometimes with brute force, other times with shrewd negotiation. He learned that power wasn't just about strength. It was also about perception, about understanding the mood of the people and the Senate, and sometimes about knowing when to push and when to hold back, much like a skilled poker player reading their opponents. The triumvirate's fate. The once powerful alliance, the triumvirate, began to fray at the edges, much like an old rope subjected to too much strain. Imagine three friends who promise to share everything, but slowly, one starts hogging the snacks, another demands more control over the TV remote, and the third feels increasingly left out. That's a bit what happened with Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus. Their initial pact, forged for mutual benefit, couldn't withstand the corrosive effects of personal ambition and shifting loyalties. Crassus, the wealthiest of the three, met his end in a disastrous campaign against the Parthians, a defeat so absolute it was like trying to catch smoke with a sieve. His death removed a crucial balancing force, leaving Caesar and Pompey to eye each other with growing suspicion. Pompey, sensing Caesar's rising popularity and military success in Gaul, began to feel the ground shifting beneath him. He had once been Rome's golden boy, but now Caesar's shadow loomed large. It was a classic case of envy and insecurity. Caesar, on the other hand, was aware of Pompey's unease and the Senate's growing fear of his power. He knew that if he relinquished his command, he would be vulnerable to prosecution. So, when the Senate, influenced by Pompey, demanded he disband his legions, Caesar faced a stark choice: surrender his influence or march on Rome itself. The decision to cross the Rubicon River with his army was, in essence, Caesar's defiant declaration that the triumvirate was well and truly over. It was a point of no return, a dramatic gamble that plunged Rome into civil war. Pompey, now allied with the conservative faction of the Senate, found himself on the losing side. His attempts to rally forces proved futile against Caesar's seasoned legions. The grand vision of a stable, shared rule had dissolved into a brutal power struggle, a stark reminder that even the strongest bonds can break under the weight of ambition. Ultimately, Pompey fled Rome, seeking refuge in Greece, but Caesar's forces pursued him relentlessly. Their final confrontation at the Battle of Pharsalus was decisive. Pompey, defeated and disgraced, tried to escape to Egypt, hoping for sanctuary. However, his reception there was anything but welcoming. Instead of a safe harbor, he found a treacherous welcome. The Egyptians, seeking to curry favor with the victorious Caesar, had him assassinated. His death marked the definitive end of the triumvirate and paved the way for Caesar's absolute rule, a somber conclusion to an alliance that had promised so much but delivered so much discord. Passion's fire. The fire of passion burned brightly in Cleopatra's life, a force that shaped her destiny and the course of empires. It wasn't just a fleeting emotion, it was a strategic tool, a powerful allure that she wielded with masterful precision. Think of it like a skilled negotiator who understands the power of charm and persuasion. Cleopatra understood that her intellect and her ability to captivate were just as potent as any army. Her relationships, particularly with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, were not mere romances. They were political alliances forged in the crucible of intense personal connection. She wasn't afraid to embrace her desires, using them to secure her throne and protect Egypt's independence. This fiery spirit, this unapologetic embrace of passion, was a defining characteristic that set her apart. Her passion wasn't confined to the bedroom. It infused every aspect of her being. It was in the way she presented herself, the lavish banquets she hosted, the very air of mystique she cultivated. She understood spectacle, the art of making an unforgettable impression. Imagine a modern celebrity understanding the power of a perfectly curated social media presence, but on a grand, ancient scale. Cleopatra created a legend around herself, a woman who could command the attention of the most powerful men in the world, not just through beauty, but through a magnetic personality and a sharp mind. This passion for life, for power, and for her kingdom fueled her every move, making her a formidable figure on the world stage. This intensity, this burning passion, also carried risks. Her affairs with Roman leaders inevitably drew Egypt into the complex and often brutal politics of Rome. When Antony's fortunes waned, so too did Cleopatra's, illustrating the double-edged sword of such powerful alliances. Yet, even in defeat, her passion remained a defining element. Her legendary suicide, choosing death over capture and humiliation, speaks volumes about the fierce independence and pride that fueled her. It was a final act of defiance, a testament to a spirit that refused to be tamed. Her life story, ablaze with passion, continues to fascinate because it reveals a woman who dared to live and love on her own terms, even when the world tried to dictate otherwise. A kingdom divided. The Nile, the lifeblood of Egypt, flowed serenely, yet beneath its calm surface, the kingdom of the Ptolemies was anything but peaceful. Cleopatra, a young woman of sharp intellect and ambitious spirit, found herself caught in the swirling currents of dynastic strife. Her own father, Ptolemy XII Elites, a man more adept at charming Roman patrons than ruling his people, had left a legacy of debt and instability. He had, in his wisdom, bequeathed his throne not just to Cleopatra, but also to her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, a boy still under the sway of his ambitious regents. This co-rule, a recipe for disaster, meant that real power rested with those who whispered in the young king's ear, and they did not look kindly upon the formidable young queen. Imagine a household where siblings are meant to share, but instead, one is actively plotting to push the other out of the family business. That was the situation in the Ptolemaic palace. Cleopatra, with her keen understanding of politics and her considerable charm, was a threat to the established order. The court advisors, men like the eunuch Pothinus and the general Achilles, saw her as an obstacle to their own ambitions. They orchestrated her removal, forcing her into exile, a political exile rather than a literal banishment to the countryside. She found herself outside the gilded cage of Alexandria, stripped of her immediate authority, but not of her resolve. Her exile, however, was not an end but a strategic pause. Cleopatra was not one to simply fade away. She possessed a remarkable ability to rally support, to inspire loyalty. While her brother and his advisors reveled in their perceived victory, she was busy forging her own alliances, gathering forces in the surrounding territories. It was a dangerous game, played with the lives of soldiers and the wealth of provinces. The division was stark. Alexandria, the heart of the kingdom, pulsed with a divided court, while the fringes of Egypt hummed with the growing discontent and the quiet preparations of a queen in waiting. The East's allure. The fragrance of the East, a heady mix of spices and exotic blooms, beckoned to Cleopatra like a siren's song. Imagine walking through a bustling bazaar, the air thick with the scent of cinnamon and cardamom, of jasmine and rosewater. This was the perfume of her world, a sensual symphony that captivated the senses. It wasn't just about pleasant smells, though. These Eastern aromas were steeped in tradition, used in rituals, in medicine, and as potent aphrodisiacs. Think of how we use lavender today to relax. The Egyptians used incense like kifi, a complex blend of herbs and resins, for everything from worship to warding off evil spirits, and perhaps to enhance a lover's embrace. This allure wasn't confined to the nose. The very colors of the East, vibrant and rich, painted a picture of opulence. Think of the deep indigos and fiery scarlets, the shimmering golds and emerald greens. These weren't just dyes. They were symbols of power, wealth, and divine favor. Cleopatra, a queen, understood the language of color. Her robes, her adornments, the very decor of her palaces, all spoke of this magnificent Eastern palette. It was a deliberate choice, a conscious embrace of the exotic that set her apart, a visual feast designed to impress and to enchant. The arts and crafts of the East also held a profound fascination. The intricate metalwork, the delicate papyrus scrolls, the elaborate jewelry crafted from precious stones and gold. These were testaments to a civilization that valued beauty and skill. Cleopatra, a patron of the arts and a scholar herself, would have surrounded herself with such treasures. She understood that these objects weren't merely decorative. They were imbued with history, with meaning, and with a certain mystique. They were tangible expressions of the East's enduring sophistication, a world away from the more austere aesthetics of Rome. Even the very concept of luxury in the East was different. It was about abundance, about indulgence, about a life lived with an almost theatrical flair. Think of lavish banquets, of silken cushions, of fountains that played perfumed water. This was a world that understood the art of living well, of savoring every moment with a sensuous intensity. Cleopatra, born into this world, embodied its spirit. She didn't just rule. She reigned with a captivating blend of intelligence and an almost intoxicating embrace of all that the East offered, a queen who understood the power of allure in its every form. Octavian's rise. The young Octavian, barely out of his teens, found himself thrust into the heart of Roman power struggles. He was Caesar's adopted heir, a fact that made him both a target and a prize. Imagine a young person suddenly inheriting a massive, complicated business after their mentor passes away unexpectedly. That was Octavian, but his business was Rome, and the shareholders were senators, generals, and a restless populace. He had to learn fast, not just about politics, but about people, who to trust, who to manipulate, and when to strike. His early years were a masterclass in strategic maneuvering. He didn't have the battlefield experience of seasoned generals, nor the oratorical flair of some of his rivals. Instead, he relied on shrewd alliances and a relentless focus on his ultimate goal. Think of it like a chess game where Octavian, though seemingly outmatched, was always thinking several moves ahead, patiently setting up his opponents for a fall. He formed pacts, like the Second Triumvirate with Mark Antony and Lepidus, not out of genuine friendship, but as a temporary means to an end, a way to consolidate power and eliminate immediate threats. It was a bit like a temporary business merger, where everyone involved had their own agenda. As he solidified his position, Octavian began to present himself not as a ruthless power grabber, but as a restorer of peace and order. He skillfully used propaganda, painting his rivals, especially Antony, as decadent and un-Roman. He was like a clever marketer, carefully crafting his image to appeal to the masses and the conservative elements of Roman society. He understood that perception was reality in Rome. His victories, like the Battle of Actium, weren't just military triumphs. They were public relations coups, solidifying his image as the savior of the Republic, even as he was fundamentally reshaping it into an empire. He was the ultimate brand builder, and his brand was stability. The Battle of Actium. The calm of the Mediterranean Sea was shattered. A vast fleet, a dazzling spectacle of gilded ships and colorful sails, gathered near Actium. On one side, the formidable Roman navy, led by Octavian, a man with ambition as sharp as a newly honed sword. Opposing him, the combined forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra, their ships a testament to Eastern opulence, ready to defend their power. It wasn't just a naval battle. It was a clash of empires, a dramatic turning point whispered on the winds. Cleopatra's flagship, a magnificent vessel rumored to be painted in hues of purple and gold, was a beacon in the chaos. Imagine the scene. The air thick with the smell of salt and sweat, the cries of men, the splintering of wood. Antony's strategy, though bold, was perhaps too reliant on the speed of his larger ships, which were not as nimble in the close quarters fighting that ensued. It was like trying to maneuver a grand ballroom dancer through a crowded marketplace. Impressive, but not always effective. The battle became a swirling vortex of confusion. Ships grappled, their oars clashing like angry metal. Antony's forces, despite their bravery, found themselves outmaneuvered by Octavian's more agile vessels. It was a bit like a game of chess where one player has all the quick pawns, while the other has fewer, slower pieces. The tide began to turn, not with a sudden dramatic sweep, but with a gradual, relentless pressure. As the day wore on, the situation grew desperate for Antony and Cleopatra. Reports suggest that Cleopatra, sensing the inevitable shift, made a difficult decision and withdrew her squadron. Antony, torn between his love and his duty, followed her, leaving his remaining ships and men to face the victorious Octavian. This departure, this moment of retreat, marked the beginning of the end, a hushed surrender to the changing winds of power. A retreat to Egypt. The humid air, thick with the scent of lotus and the distant murmur of the Nile, welcomed Cleopatra back to her beloved Egypt. After the turbulent political machinations in Rome, this return felt like shedding a heavy, foreign cloak for the familiar embrace of home. Imagine the relief washing over her, like the cool waters of the river itself. She sought solace not in grand pronouncements or strategic maneuvers, but in the quiet, ancient heart of her kingdom. The bustling markets of Alexandria, with their vibrant silks and exotic spices, offered a sensory balm, a stark contrast to the marble halls of the Senate. Here, she could simply be Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, rather than a pawn in Roman games. Her retreat wasn't a sign of weakness, but a strategic pause. Like a skilled weaver carefully rethreading her loom, Cleopatra needed to assess her position, to draw strength from her people and the land that had nurtured her lineage for centuries. She spent time in her palaces, not for ostentatious displays, but for quiet contemplation. Perhaps she walked through the meticulously tended gardens, the scent of jasmine and myrrh a gentle lullaby, or studied ancient scrolls in the great library, seeking wisdom from the past to navigate the present. These moments of introspection were as vital to her reign as any military victory. The Nile, that lifeblood of Egypt, became her sanctuary. Sailing its waters, perhaps on a grand barge adorned with sails of purple silk, offered a sense of peace and perspective. The rhythm of the river, flowing steadily towards the sea, mirrored the enduring nature of her kingdom, a stark reminder that even empires rise and fall, but Egypt, in its essence, endures. She could observe her people, their lives intertwined with the river's bounty, and feel reconnected to the very soul of her nation. This wasn't an escape from responsibility, but a profound act of reaffirming it, drawing renewed vigor from the very source of her power. The gentle lapping of the water against the hull, the distant calls of birds, all conspired to create a soothing symphony, a natural lullaby for a queen weary of discord. The Siege of Alexandria. The great harbor of Alexandria, usually bustling with ships carrying treasures from distant lands, fell eerily quiet. Warships, once symbols of Ptolemaic might, now bobbed restlessly, their sails furled, awaiting the clash. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, watched from her palace, her heart a tight knot of worry. The Roman legions, led by her formidable rival, were at the gates, their presence a heavy shadow over the vibrant city. Imagine a bustling marketplace suddenly silenced by an approaching storm. That was the feeling that settled over Alexandria. The defenders, loyal to Cleopatra, prepared for what was to come. They knew the Romans were a disciplined force, like a well-oiled machine, but they also knew their city, their home. Soldiers reinforced the walls, their movements precise and practiced. Supplies were gathered, a desperate attempt to outlast the siege. It was a tense waiting game, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of the sea. Every creak of a ship, every distant shout, sent a ripple of unease through the populace. The fighting, when it came, was fierce. Roman soldiers, eager for victory, pressed their assault. The defenders fought with the courage of those defending their very existence. Arrows rained down like a sudden summer shower, and the clang of swords echoed through the narrow streets. This wasn't just a battle for a city, it was a battle for the future, for the very soul of Egypt. Cleopatra, though not on the front lines, was a constant presence, her resolve a beacon for her people. Despite their bravery, the sheer might of Rome began to tell. The siege wore on, a relentless pressure that tested the limits of endurance. Food grew scarce, and the once proud city began to show the strain. It was like watching a beautiful tapestry slowly fray at the edges, thread by thread. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming odds, the spirit of Alexandria and its queen flickered, refusing to be extinguished easily. Hope's fading light. The once brilliant star of Cleopatra began its slow descent. Her alliances, the very pillars that had propped up her reign, started to crumble like ancient papyrus left too long in the sun. The Romans, a force that had both courted and conquered, now saw Egypt as a prize ripe for the taking, its queen a mere pawn in their grander games of power. She had navigated treacherous political waters for so long, a skill honed through years of strategic brilliance and undeniable charm. Yet, even the most skilled sailor can be caught in a storm that no amount of clever maneuvering can escape. The whispers of discontent within her own court grew louder, fueled by fear and the ever-present shadow of Roman legions massing on the horizon. It was a chilling realization, a slow dawning that the vibrant tapestry of her life was beginning to unravel, thread by precious thread. The confidence that once radiated from her, a beacon for her people, now flickered with uncertainty. She had gambled with empires, played a dangerous game of diplomacy with men who commanded armies and reshaped continents. Her intellect was sharp, her wit as quick as any asp strike, but even the sharpest mind struggles against overwhelming odds. The sheer might of Rome was a relentless tide, and it was becoming increasingly clear that her kingdom, her legacy, would be swept away. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a gradual erosion, like a magnificent statue worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Each setback, each betrayal, chipped away at the foundation of her power, leaving her increasingly isolated. She remembered moments of triumph, of standing tall beside powerful figures, of commanding respect and admiration. Those memories, once sources of strength, now felt like distant echoes belonging to a different life. The dreams she held for Egypt, for its prosperity and independence, seemed to recede with each passing day. It was a profound sadness, a quiet despair that settled deep within her heart. The vibrant colors of her reign were muting, fading into the somber tones of impending defeat. The light of her power, once so dazzling, was dimming, casting long shadows across the land she so fiercely loved. It was a lonely vigil, watching her world slowly darken. The asp's embrace. The asp's embrace, a chilling finality, was not a violent struggle but a quiet surrender. Cleopatra, knowing her reign and her life were at an end, chose a method that offered a swift, almost serene departure. This wasn't an impulsive act, but one carefully considered, a final assertion of control in a world that had sought to strip her of it. Imagine the venom, a potent cocktail of toxins, working its magic not with a roar, but with a whisper. It's like a very strong sleeping potion, but instead of dreams, it brings an eternal rest. The serpent's bite, precise and deliberate, delivered its payload, and the body, once vibrant with life and ambition, began its slow descent into stillness. It's a stark contrast to the fiery passion and political maneuvering that defined her life, a gentle closing of a grand, dramatic chapter. The venom of the asp, specifically the Egyptian cobra, is known to paralyze. It affects the nervous system, much like how a local anesthetic can numb a small area, but on a much grander scale. This paralysis creeps through the body, starting with the muscles and eventually reaching the respiratory system. Think of it as a heavy blanket slowly settling over your breathing, making each inhale more difficult until it ceases altogether. There wasn't the frantic gasping one might expect. Rather, the body's own functions quietly shut down. This physiological process, while deadly, allowed for a peaceful transition, a way to slip away from the world without the harshness of a physical fight. It was a chosen end, a quiet exit from the stage. The choice of the asp itself held significant symbolism. In ancient Egypt, the cobra was revered, associated with divine authority and protection, often depicted on the headdresses of pharaohs. For Cleopatra, to embrace this creature for her final moments was to reclaim a part of her royal heritage, to depart as a queen, not as a captive. It was a defiant act, using a symbol of power to assert her will even in death. This wasn't just about ending her life. It was about how she would end it, a deliberate choice that spoke volumes about her character and her understanding of the world she inhabited. It was a final, regal gesture. The aftermath, as legend tells it, was one of profound peace. There was no outward sign of distress, no contorted features, just a body that had ceased to breathe. This lack of struggle, this serene stillness, is perhaps what makes the asp's embrace so compellingly tragic. It was a final, intimate moment between a queen and a creature of ancient lore, a quiet communion that sealed her fate. It was the ultimate act of self-determination, a silent rebellion against the forces that sought to parade her through Rome as a trophy. The asp offered not just death, but an escape, a final, dignified withdrawal from the relentless demands of power and politics. A queen's final rest. The air in the mausoleum grew heavy, thick with the scent of lotus and myrrh. Cleopatra, her regal bearing undimmed even in her final moments, reclined on a cushioned divan. The asp, its scales shimmering like dark jewels, had done its work swiftly and mercifully. No grand pronouncements, no dramatic pleas, just a quiet surrender. Her attendants, loyal to the last, watched with tear-filled eyes, their grief a silent testament to a queen they adored. They knew that the Roman eagle, triumphant and terrible, would soon descend, and with it, the end of an era. She had always been a creature of beauty and intellect, a ruler who navigated the treacherous currents of power with a grace that captivated emperors. Her mind was as sharp as any blade, her charm a weapon more potent than any legion. Yet, in this final stillness, all that grandeur receded, leaving behind a woman at peace. The whispers of history would forever paint her as a seductress, a temptress of powerful men. But here, in the hushed sanctuary of her tomb, she was simply Cleopatra, a queen preparing for her ultimate journey, a journey beyond the reach of empires and ambition. Her hand, adorned with rings of gold and lapis lazuli, lay gently on the silken fabric. The pulse in her wrist, once so vibrant, now a mere flicker, was fading. She had faced down armies, charmed intellects, and commanded loyalty with an authority that few possessed. Now, she faced the greatest mystery of all, not with fear, but with a quiet dignity. The legend of her beauty was known throughout the known world, a beauty that had inspired poets and fueled the ambitions of men. But it was her spirit, her indomitable will, that truly defined her reign. The last breath escaped her lips like a sigh, a gentle exhalation that stirred the perfumed air. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft weeping of her devoted servants. They would guard her resting place, ensuring her memory remained untarnished, even as Rome sought to erase her very existence from the annals of history. The world outside would soon be consumed by the news of her passing, by the triumph of Octavian. But within these stone walls, there was only the quiet dignity of a queen finding her final, eternal rest, a rest earned through a life lived with extraordinary passion and power. The end of an era. The sands of Egypt whispered tales of change. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh, felt the weight of an empire shifting. Rome, a relentless tide, was lapping at her shores. It wasn't a sudden storm, but a slow, inexorable advance. Think of it like a favorite old sweater, worn thin at the elbows, familiar and comforting, but eventually succumbing to the passage of time. Her reign, once a vibrant tapestry of power and diplomacy, was fraying at the edges. The alliances she had carefully woven, like intricate lace, were beginning to unravel. Her dealings with the powerful Romans, first Caesar and then Antony, had been a delicate dance on a precipice. She sought to preserve Egypt's independence, a jewel in her crown, but Rome's ambition was a hungry beast. It was a bit like trying to keep a playful puppy from chewing up your most prized possessions. You love the energy, but you have to be vigilant. The battles, the political maneuvering, the very air of Alexandria seemed to hum with this impending transition. The grand libraries, filled with centuries of knowledge, the bustling marketplaces overflowing with exotic goods, all felt like they stood on the brink of a new, uncertain chapter. The power of the Ptolemies, a dynasty that had ruled for centuries, was drawing to a close. It was a profound moment, marking not just the end of a queen's rule, but the sunset of an ancient world order. The very foundations of Egypt's long-held traditions and its unique place in the Mediterranean were being reshaped by Roman might. Imagine the grandest of fireworks displays, brilliant and awe-inspiring, but inevitably fading into the night sky. This was the twilight of an era, a time of both sorrow and reluctant acceptance, as the old ways gave way to the new. Echoes in the sands. The desert wind whispers tales of ancient Egypt, a soft sigh across endless dunes. It carries the scent of millennia, of sun-baked earth and long-vanished empires. Imagine the vastness, a canvas of ochre and gold stretching to meet a sky of impossible blue. This is the land where Cleopatra, a queen of legendary beauty and sharp intellect, once walked. Her footsteps, though long gone, leave an imprint on the very air, a subtle resonance that lingers. Think of the sands themselves. They are not merely inert grains, they are storytellers. Each ripple, each drift, is shaped by forces unseen, much like the currents of power and politics that swirled around Cleopatra. The desert holds secrets, buried deep beneath its shifting surface, much as her reign was a complex tapestry of alliances, rivalries, and passionate affairs. The sun, a relentless eye in the sky, has witnessed it all, from the grandeur of her palaces to the quiet moments of her life. These sands have felt the tread of Roman legions and the silken robes of Egyptian royalty. They have absorbed the heat of fierce battles and the coolness of moonlit nights. Cleopatra, a woman who navigated treacherous waters with remarkable skill, was as much a part of this landscape as the pyramids themselves. Her presence, though ephemeral, left an indelible mark, a legend woven into the very fabric of Egyptian history. The echoes are faint now, like a half-forgotten melody, but they are there, carried on the breeze. Legacy of the Serpent. Cleopatra's legacy, often entwined with the symbol of the serpent, is a fascinating tapestry woven from power, allure, and enduring myth. This wasn't just about a woman. It was about the very idea of Egypt, a land of ancient wonders and formidable rulers, personified in her. Think of her not just as a queen, but as a living embodiment of a kingdom that had captivated the world for millennia. Her story, passed down through generations, became a potent symbol, much like how a famous brand name today instantly evokes a certain image or quality. The serpent, particularly the cobra, was a royal emblem in ancient Egypt, representing divine authority and protection. Cleopatra, by embracing this imagery, consciously positioned herself as the inheritor of this sacred power, a ruler blessed by the gods themselves. Her influence extended far beyond the borders of Egypt. Roman historians, her primary chroniclers, painted her as a woman of extraordinary intellect and charisma, capable of swaying the most powerful men of her time. This wasn't mere gossip. It was a testament to her diplomatic skill and her understanding of human nature. She knew how to command attention, how to negotiate, and how to forge alliances that served her kingdom's interests. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, while often sensationalized, were also strategic partnerships that sought to secure Egypt's independence and prosperity in a rapidly changing world. It's like a shrewd business leader today who builds strong connections to ensure their company thrives. The serpent aspect of her legacy also speaks to her cunning and adaptability. She navigated treacherous political waters with remarkable skill, outmaneuvering rivals and protecting her throne. This wasn't brute force. It was a sophisticated dance of diplomacy, persuasion, and sometimes sheer audacity. Her ability to maintain Egypt's autonomy for so long in the face of Roman expansion is a remarkable feat, a testament to her strategic brilliance. The stories that emerged, whether true or embellished, solidified her image as a powerful, enigmatic figure, a queen who dared to challenge the might of Rome. This enduring fascination with her, the legacy of the serpent, continues to inspire art, literature, and popular culture even today, proving the lasting power of a compelling legend. Cleopatra's myth. The legend of Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, is a tapestry woven with threads of power, romance, and enduring mystery. She wasn't just a ruler. She became an icon, a symbol of allure that has captivated imaginations for millennia. Think of her as the ultimate influencer of her time, but instead of social media, she commanded armies and captivated emperors. Her story, embellished over centuries, often overshadows the shrewd politician and capable administrator she truly was. It's this larger-than-life persona, the one splashed across ancient coins and later Renaissance paintings, that truly became her myth. This myth often paints her as a seductress, a woman who used her beauty to manipulate powerful Roman leaders like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. While she was undoubtedly charismatic and intelligent, capable of speaking multiple languages and understanding complex politics, the popular image focuses on her romantic entanglements. It's as if her political prowess and her intellect were secondary to her supposed irresistible charm. Imagine a modern-day CEO whose entire career is reduced to her dating life, ignoring her business acumen. That's a bit like what happened to Cleopatra. Her relationships were strategic, yes, but they were also part of a larger game of survival for Egypt. The drama surrounding her death, often depicted as a tragic suicide by ASP, further fuels the legend. This dramatic end cemented her image as a figure of doomed passion. It's a powerful narrative, one that resonates with themes of love and loss, but it also simplifies a complex woman who navigated a treacherous political landscape. The enduring appeal of her story lies in this blend of historical reality and romanticized fiction. She remains a figure who sparks debate and fascination, a testament to how stories, once told, can take on a life of their own, far beyond the original facts. The myth of Cleopatra is, in many ways, more alive today than the woman herself ever was. The world remembers. The world remembers Cleopatra not just as a queen, but as a legend woven into the fabric of history. Her name echoes through millennia, sparking images of exotic beauty, sharp intellect, and a life lived on a grand, dramatic stage. It's a memory that transcends the dusty scrolls and archaeological digs. It lives in the stories we tell, the art we create, and even in the very way we speak of powerful women. Think of it like a catchy song that gets stuck in your head. Cleopatra's story is that persistent, that unforgettable. Her influence wasn't confined to the borders of her kingdom. She was a player on the international scene, a woman who navigated the treacherous currents of Roman politics with a skill that astonished her contemporaries. She wasn't just a figurehead. She was a strategist, a diplomat, and a captivating personality who could charm emperors. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, while often sensationalized, were also strategic alliances that shaped the geopolitical landscape of the ancient world. It's like a shrewd business deal, but with empires instead of stocks. The enduring fascination with Cleopatra stems from this potent mix of power, romance, and tragedy. We remember her as a woman who dared to defy convention, who commanded armies and influenced the destinies of nations. Her story, passed down through poets, playwrights, and historians, has become a touchstone for understanding ambition, love, and the ephemeral nature of power. Even today, her image graces countless books, films, and artworks, a testament to a life that continues to captivate and inspire. Her legacy is like a well-loved classic novel. It's always relevant, always drawing new readers into its compelling narrative. And so, the legend of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, fades into the quiet embrace of the Nile. We've journeyed through her life, from a young queen navigating treacherous political waters to a powerful ruler who captivated two of Rome's most influential men. She was a diplomat, a scholar, and a woman who, despite the immense pressures of her time, sought to preserve her kingdom and her legacy. Her story, though centuries old, reminds us of the enduring power of ambition, love, and the fight for one's destiny. Now, as you drift into a peaceful sleep, let the sands of time settle gently. Perhaps you'll dream of ancient palaces, whispered secrets, or the shimmering lights of Alexandria. Thank you for joining us on this soft journey through history. If you found this calming, consider subscribing for more gentle explorations of the past. Next time, we'll unravel the mysteries of another powerful woman who shaped the ancient world, Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who wore the beard. Sleep well.